I'm telling you, we make it back, I'm going straight to church.
Ain't much left of him, boss.
Hey everyone, this is Pete. Every so often, I like to take an evening off from the big games that I'm playing, pick out a random title from my shelves, and just play it without any expectations. I've acquired a lot of games over the years, with many of them being things I picked up primarily because they were cheap and, which I hasten to add, looked like they might be interesting at first glance. I'm not nabbing copies of every FIFA game just because they're cheap, for example, although I bet someone out there has. It often takes me a while to get to these games, but I like having them because they're the gaming equivalent of comfort food. On those occasions when I'm stricken with analysis paralysis and not sure exactly what I fancy doing of an evening, I often find the best choice is to throw caution and rationality to the wind and go with something completely unexpected. More often than not, I end up having a good time. Just recently, I'd been feeling a bit of nostalgia for classic combat flight sims, and mourning the fact that those didn't really seem to be a thing anymore. Sure, there's a couple of big hitters still around, such as DCS World, but it's rare to get a full-on, standalone, self-contained, not free-to-play commercial release that is about aeroplanes blowing things up, whether on computer or console. Feeling a bit of hunger for something along those lines, I headed for the shelves and grabbed a copy of Blazing Angels, Squadrons of WWII for Xbox 360 that I'd previously acquired for somewhere in the region of £1.50 and decided to give it a go. What I got was not exactly the flight sim experience I'd been craving, but still a game that I enjoyed enough to play through the entire campaign in a single evening. Which I feel says something at least vaguely positive about the game, so I thought I'd tell you all about it too. Blazing Angels Squadrons of WWII was first released for original Xbox, Xbox 360 and Windows PC in March of 2006. It was developed by Ubisoft Bucharest and published by, unsurprisingly, Ubisoft. This was back in the days before Ubisoft was into annualised franchises. Assassin's Creed was still more than a year away at this point, and it's a reminder of back when they used to have a rather more varied output of games. But that's something to get into another time perhaps. The game was subsequently ported to PlayStation 3 in late 2006 and Nintendo Wii a year later. There are some notable differences between the versions too. The Wii and PS3 versions flesh out the story a little with some additional dialogue and character depth, plus one of the main characters is shot down and killed in the D-Day mission in these versions, whereas he survives to the end of the original releases. This is noteworthy from a gameplay perspective, as we'll see in a moment. The story begins with the unnamed player protagonist flying a training mission in the English countryside, blasting some decommissioned balloons for target practice and dropping toilet paper on the local church, much to the local squadron commander's annoyance, to get a feel for dropping bombs. Before long, you're thrown into real action though, first against a scout plane and subsequently against a group of German aircraft pursuing an allied pilot in a damaged plane attempting to make it home.
It's a kick, ain't it? Shoot him down before he gets away.
Take more of that.
That's it. Just like a Dodge. There you go.
From here, the player character forms a squadron consisting of themselves, Tom, the pilot you rescue in the training mission, Joe, the mechanic who accompanied you on the training mission, and Frank, an aggressive pilot who is all too keen to blast as many bad guys as possible at every opportunity. Following the Battle of Dunkirk, during which the player's squadron tipped the balance firmly in favour of the Allies, the group becomes known as the Angels of Dunkirk and is sent to various hotspots around the world to help out, their reputation often preceding them. What then follows is a series of missions that essentially acts as a Best of World War II compilation, allowing you to participate in the Battle of Britain, the North African campaign, including a challenging reconnaissance mission in the middle of a sandstorm, the defence of Pearl Harbor, the Battle of Midway, the Guadalcanal campaign, D-Day, the liberation of Paris, and the Battle of Berlin. Since it has seemingly been mandatory for arcade and console-based flight games to feature canyon missions ever since Sega's Afterburner, Blazing Angels also includes one of these, where the player must accompany Joe on a perilous flight through a Norwegian fjord in order to strike a German heavy water base. Expect numerous mishaps. The missions provide varied context for the action, as well as plenty of different settings to fly over. The structure of each mission is nicely different too, with some tasking you with defending positions, others demanding that you complete a strike against an enemy position, sometimes against a time limit, and others focusing on dogfighting against fighters and bombers. The aforementioned desert reconnaissance and canyon missions are particular highlights for their unique style and gameplay mechanics. Gameplay in Blazing Angels is emphatically not of the flight simulator mould. There is nothing even vaguely realistic about the way the planes in this game handle, to such a degree that I must confess on first booting the game up, I almost considered being uppity enough to rip it straight out of the Xbox and dismiss it completely. Something about it kept me playing though, and I'm glad about that. Controls are simple. You can dive and climb in a vaguely realistic fashion, though the planes have a rather low maximum altitude above which they will stall, regardless of their actual speed, but turning is accomplished simply through pushing left and right to turn, rather than having to bank and either pull back on the stick or use the rudder. For those who are actually accustomed to flight sims, this takes a little getting used to, but if you think of this game more as a take on games like Star Fox's all-range mode sequences, or the Star Wars Rogue Squadron games, it makes a lot more sense. In fact, that Rogue Squadron comparison is particularly apt, but we'll come back to that in a moment.
The plane that can fly in this hasn't been built. There is nothing to report from over here. No enemy movement.
Since you're flying World War II aircraft, you do not have fancy radar and avionics to locate your targets, though Blazing Angels does make life a little easier on the player by featuring a targeting system, allowing you to lock on to specific aerial or ground targets. This is combined with a view that keeps both you and your target in sight at all times, similar to the Tacti view Microprose pioneered in its 16-bit polygonal titles such as F-19 Stealth Fighter and F-15 Strike Eagle 2. This makes for some quite cinematic scenes at times. Likewise, the limited technology of the time in which the game is set means that your weapons loadouts have a significant manual component. In many missions you'll have nothing but machine guns or cannons and be expected to lead your targets appropriately to hit them, though some helpful feedback from the aiming reticle helps with this. In some missions you have special weapons equipped, either rockets, bombs, torpedoes or a reconnaissance camera depending on the situation. To keep the action fast-paced and arcadey, you can never actually run completely out of these weapons, though fire a bunch off and it will take a moment or two for them to recharge before you can use them again. Your wingmen also effectively act as special abilities, each with a short cooldown between uses. Joe, being a mechanic, allows you to repair your aircraft by inputting a short button combination. Tom taunts enemies who are pursuing you, luring them to attack him for a short period, and Frank, meanwhile, eagerly awaits every time you order him to deliver an all-out attack on your currently selected target, and everything else in the same formation. Joe's ability plays a significant role in making the early stages of the game feel quite easy, since it's possible to repair your aircraft from a flaming wreck to pristine condition with the tap of the D-pad, so long as you don't take too much additional damage in the meantime. In the Wii and PS3 versions, the fact he gets shot down and killed in the D-Day mission not only provides a dramatic narrative moment, it also effectively takes the training wheels off for the later stages of the game. In the earlier versions, meanwhile, Joe is present for the majority of the missions in the game. It balances out though, because around the point you reach the canyon mission, during which Joe is your only companion, the difficulty ramps up significantly. Not only that, the final mission in Berlin features a sequence where you have to endure an intense assault from all sides for 3 minutes without the ability to repair yourself. Yes, Blazing Angels pulled an Objective Survive finale a full 4 years before Halo reached it. Let's address something that I've already teased, and which you may well have noticed from watching the footage and hearing the game audio at this point. That is how there's a distinct sense throughout the entirety of Blazing Angels that Ubisoft Bucharest really wanted to be working on a Star Wars game, specifically a Rogue Squadron game. The gameplay and overall design of Blazing Angels is very similar to the classic Rogue Squadron games, albeit with the radar display being replaced with the targeting view mechanic. The background music sounds distinctly John Williams, and hell, the game even concludes with a trench run down the River Spree in Berlin, demanding that you take out 4 radar stations against a tight time limit before your allies arrive. There's even a Darth Vader and a TIE Advanced moment as the grand finale, as a German ace who previously taunted you during the Battle of Britain shows up with a squadron of experimental jet fighters in one last-ditch attempt to take down the Angels of Dunkirk. All this makes a certain amount of sense, of course. I mean, the clue's in the name, Star Wars. Although drawing a certain amount of inspiration from World War II as well as a number of other historical and fictional sources, it's worth noting that despite the title, Star Wars was never really what you'd call a series of war movies in the traditional sense. For the most part, they lack moral ambiguity and political commentary in favour of an easy-to-pass plucky heroes versus space Nazis sort of plot, and are more about heroic tales of daring do rather than the realities of war. But then that's exactly what Blazing Angels is too. At no point in Blazing Angels do you really feel like it's attempting to depict the horrors of World War II, which were considerable and very well documented. Instead, it's a tale of the heroic band of American angels who swoop in and save the day during every major battle throughout World War II. It is, to put it another way, a series of tales of daring do concerning a small band of plucky heroes taking on the actual Nazis. Some may raise an eyebrow at this, particularly how it downplays the struggles of the European Allied forces in favour of the heroic Americans in particular. But it's clear right from the outset that Blazing Angels was, like Star Wars, never aiming to be a harrowing war movie. Instead, it's a simple, morally unambiguous tale in which you cheer the heroes, boo the villains, and applaud when there's a big explosion. And that's fine. Sometimes that's exactly what you want and need from your gaming experiences.
Got another one.
He's dropping in behind you, sir. Shake him.
Target eliminated.
Direct hit. You're taking fire. Get yourself clear.
Little pieces everywhere. You cannot be moving down.
Plus, it's fun. Dear Lord, it's fun. That's what kept me playing after my initial frustration that it wasn't exactly the flight sim-like experience I was hoping for when I first booted it up. That's what kept me playing through the entire 4 to 5 hour campaign all evening until I beat it. And that's what's likely to keep me coming back for the additional longevity provided by chasing medals in the campaign missions, the mini-campaigns that focus on timed bombing and dogfighting missions, the arcade mode in which you fend off waves of enemies, and the ace duel challenges which pit you against a strong pilot in the same aircraft you're flying. Blazing Angels may not be much of a looker by modern standards thanks to its cross-generational release. Its often janky frame rate, even on the HD consoles, may be off-putting to modern gamers. Its borderline disrespectful treatment of World War II as subject matter may even seem outright offensive to some, and if not that, then the comedy German, Japanese and French accent certainly will upset someone these days. But if you're after an enjoyable, explosive aerial combat experience in the ripping yarn sort of mould, Blazing Angels Squadrons of World War II is a thoroughly agreeable way to spend an evening or two. I'm glad I decided to take a chance on it, and with copies typically going for just £1 or £2 at the time of recording, it's practically zero risk to you if you think you might fancy giving it a shot also. So for now, I'll just say pip pip cheerio old bean. As always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again next time.
So far, so good.
You got it. He's going down.
Hard. We're getting him through.
Climb, climb! He's in my sights! The Führer will feel my wrath!
I'm gonna have to start dropping these guys 2 at a time.
Die, 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 die! I'll finish this one myself.
Engines 1 and 2 are out. We lost another one.
So easy!
I'm going down. Give them hell, boys.
Somebody get me clear!
This is gonna be loud. That's it. Let's keep up the good work.